Have you ever been looking at something, focusing or concentrating hard on the thing when, from the corner of your eye, you see movement? Then you look up, thinking someone is there in the room with you, only to find the same empty room you were in before. But you could swear you saw something move, didn't you? You can't be seeing things. Are you going crazy? No, you're not. If you haven't ever experienced something like this, chances are you probably live close to where I am. I live in a small town, a few thousand people, but our area and the surrounding mountains are plagued by a race of creatures we nicknamed the Corner Shadows, or the CSs for short. Everyone has seen something moving in the corner of their eye in this town, but unlike the story I mentioned above, there's something actually there. The townspeople in, let's call it Rivertown, are dulled to the CSs by now, but my school year ends a day earlier than it used to, thanks to one of them. They're usually peaceful. Yes, it has been hypothesized that every waking minute of their lives is spent trying to get you and kill you God knows how. But it's very difficult for them to do such a thing. I say very difficult, because it's not impossible. As I'm about to explain. I remember it like it was yesterday, when in fact it was 3 years ago. Well, 2 years and 364 days. May 25th, 2018. So I guess it was 3 years ago. Time flies. I remember it so vividly. The last day of freshman year, and every single student in the building was ready to grab their stuff and run like hell from the building. I was hanging out with a few friends. Let's call them M, S, V, and J, getting ready for the first moments of summer freedom. I could see a CS in the corner of a room, clinging to the ceiling, and even from the corner of my eye, I knew it wanted to pounce at any given moment. The bell chimed throughout the halls and classrooms, and everyone leapt out of their seats and bounded for their lockers. As the CSs flipped and contorted like ninjas to stay hidden from our sight, within minutes, the building was empty, save for a few teachers conversing with each other and some students who were having trouble getting packed up. I was one of such student, and I was doing my best to shove all my books into my bag and head out to freedom, while M and S stood there waiting for me. They couldn't leave because I was their ride. I just missed the cutoff for school when I was little, so I'd already turned 16 in March. So they were trying just not to ditch me and walk home. I finally was able to zip my bag up and sprint out the front doors, heading for my car. As I reached my car, I suddenly became aware my phone wasn't in my pocket. Embarrassed, I yelled, "Oh crap, I must have forgot my phone." To which M and S both responded with an audible groan. I tossed my keys to S and told him to pull the car up to the front doors as I made a U-turn back to the front doors. Entering the front doors back into the school building, I passed V and J, who waved to me and said we should all meet at the diner down the street, but I didn't bother answering because I knew they were just going to text me later after I found my phone. I skipped through the maze of hallways, retracing my steps and scanning the ground for a shiny purple object. I finally found it laying on the front floor in front of my locker as I turned a corner. I knelt down to pick it up, but as I did, I saw a classmate standing farther down the hall, staring at a corner of the long room. I recognized him as, let's just call him N, one of the few people in the school I didn't like. He was never nice to me in grade school, and we never had anything in common, so I never hung out around him. When we were together, though, he was always pretty rude to me, making jokes and telling me how nerds should never get the privilege to be in his presence. Yeah, what a tool. I looked up from my crouching position to see what N was staring at, but to my surprise, there was nothing there. I could see a couple CSs over me, even in my peripheral. "In?" I asked, but he didn't move. He just kept staring at the corner. I made a face that said, "Alright, weirdo, see you later," and turned to leave. As I did, though, I noticed a CS sticking to the ceiling in front of N, and soon realized that was what N was staring at. I don't know why, I don't know how, but he saw it. He was staring right at it. I was obviously confused and concerned because people weren't supposed to be able to see a CS. But before I could make another move, it happened. Even from my peripheral, I could see the CS jump downward from its position on the ceiling to where N was standing in a startling screech, tearing his body apart like the creature from A Quiet Place. I made a sound that was a mixture of a gasp and a scream as the CS disappeared from view into the adjacent hallway, spinning on my heels and bolting to the front doors. Against my better judgment, though, I went back to N, just to see if he was okay, or even still alive. That was a big mistake. As I ran back towards N, I could hear the CS crashing through the building, probably destroying lockers and smashing windows on its way to wherever the hell it was going. I don't want to find out. N didn't even look like he'd ever been alive, or ever had been a human being before. He had been split in two by the CS, and his lifeless body lay sprawled out across the floor, blood staining the tiles below him. On his chest were two deep puncture wounds, probably made by the CS's arms as it lashed onto him. I gagged silently, turning around so as not to see the corpse anymore. I pulled my phone from my pocket and quickly dialed 911 with shaky fingers. The police in the area knew all about the CS's, so of course they didn't believe me when I told them that someone had stared directly into its face. They still came to the school anyway, and I just stood there, motionless and silent. When the police finally showed up 10 minutes later, I was still standing in the same place as before, still clutching my phone in my right hand. Apparently, N's blood had gone all over the place when the CS attacked him because my shirt and shorts had been coated with red, along with some of my arms. I hadn't even noticed. An officer escorted me from the building, and I could clearly see the look of horror on M and S's faces as I was led outside. They ran up to me, asking me what had happened and why the cops were here, but I just stayed silent. I couldn't give them an answer. The officer took them home in a squad car a few minutes later, but told me to stay, as I should stay here to talk to some officers. I told them the entire story, but they were still skeptical. Unfortunately, I was the only person who saw it, because CSs can't be seen on video for some reason, so after getting a new set of clothes, they sent me home. The last day of sophomore year went smoothly. It was still Friday, May 24th, because there was no pattern yet. When I took M&S home, though, I heard the worst story. 3 other students had died from similar circumstances when they were leaving the building. One was hanging from the ceiling by his shoelaces, another had been stuffed into his locker, and the third was thrown through a window from the second floor. I had flashbacks to the year prior. I even knew one of the students that was killed. I just talked to him earlier that day. The last straw for the principal and superintendent was happened the next year, my junior year, Friday, May 22nd. I was just getting into my car to leave school when the police pulled up to the building. Apparently, another 7 students had been killed in the same room just minutes after I'd exited the building. They had all been stabbed through their heads, pinning their faces to the desks. Now it's senior year. It's the last day of high school for me. But I can't help but think what could have happened if I had looked up just a little bit that day. Maybe I wouldn't have seen the CS anyway. Maybe I would have, and I would have been the 12th victim. I don't know. But what I do know is that the CSs are getting braver. They knew the pattern of students on the last day of the school year. Now I guess they'll attack every last day. Lately, I've also been noting strange little details about the CS's experience that I didn't before, as if they're slowly coming into better view. As I said, they're getting braver. I guess they're slowly realizing that they don't need to hide, because they're obviously much, much stronger and faster than humans. I don't want to stay in this town for much longer, because I'm honestly afraid that if I do, they'll find me. And judging by the state of N's body all those years ago, they won't have any trouble ripping me apart like a piece of paper. I was lucky enough to get accepted into NYU, so I can move away from this hellhole for good. I just keep wondering if this will be the day that CS finally builds up the courage to strike. So please, if you ever see movement in the corner of your eye, don't look. Don't try to investigate that shadow in the dark corner of your room. Because if you ever see movement from the corner of your eye, then chances are you live close to my town.